Hello, and welcome to episode number 16 of the Marriage Coach Podcast, where we are here to help you take your relationship from surviving to thriving.
Today on the Marriage Coach Podcast, we will be discussing family ties.
Our family ties are the things that tie us to our family and our family relationships. Studies show that our families strongly influence the way we think, the way we believe, the things we value, and things of that nature. It also shows that if you are born and raised in a family that has positive relationships and a positive influence on you, that you tend to lead a positive life and have positive relationships yourself. It also shows that the latter is true.
Right.
If you have negative family relationships, it tends to spill over into your life, and it leads to negativity in your life as well as negativity in your relationship.
Right. And let's be clear about it. I mean, this affects every relationship.
Yes.
The negativity that comes over from, our family, it definitely, it ruins our friendships. It ruins our relationships on our jobs. It ruins the relationship in parenting. It ruins the relationship in business, entrepreneurship, in fellowship with God. It definitely affects all that, so it's very important, the family ties, the things that we learn and we adapted to from our families. We have to really be careful, especially going into a marriage, because again, you have two people coming together as one unit, and it can be very difficult when they're coming from two different backgrounds.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. We discuss this about ourselves. Your family, my family, your spouse's family, your significant other family,
Right.
Your families can be completely different.
Yeah.
Your families could have things that are in common, but it's the differences that is important to explore, because those are the things that can sometimes cause issues for us when your spouse or significant other was raised to believe, think, or feel a certain way about one thing, and you were raised to think, believe, or feel another way about that same thing. So it's important that we explore our differences and we work towards ways to mesh those things together as we become one. We talked about things in my family and how my family is, and not versus, but in retrospect to the way your family is, because we don't want to say versus, because that's when it becomes one is a win and a loss, or better or good. Right. But it's important, very, very important to a relationship, that you understand the differences between your families. And these differences can be something as minor as how you celebrate holidays and what your family does, different family traditions, or it could be something major like abuse, infidelity, or alcoholism, or drug abuse in a family. So the family ties can be completely different for you and your significant other.
Right. And then another thing, it can be somebody, if you was raised by a single parent. I mean, you and your parent most likely have a special bond, especially if you're the only child. So it's been you and your parent forever. So you've been getting all that attention from one person versus someone that comes from a house with 4 or 5 kids. I mean, this changes the dynamic of the way you think. I mean, for example, somebody coming from a family of 5, I mean, your whole life, you wasn't getting that one-on-one attention. So now you learn to adapt, and you're more,
more
you may be
introverted than you're
right,
someone
right.
that is
Right. I mean, you may be a introvert, because there's so many people. You learn how to manage and move around on yourself versus somebody that was raised by them and their parent. They're introvert, or they was raised with their mother and their father, but they were the only child. I mean, so you're the only child. So I mean, you're getting all that attention.
Right?
The relationship. I mean, even going into the marriage, the relationship is going to be different. I mean, the person that two parents that's the only child, and they were very close with their parents. That's going to be something that a spouse on the other hand that may not have had that
Have to learn to
experience.
adjust.
You
Yeah.
have to adjust to that,
Hmm.
so we just want you to be aware of these family ties. These things is very important, and they can cause problems in the relationship if you're not aware. But we want you to understand that this is totally normal. This is totally normal. The different, our backgrounds, where we come from, who we're gonna hang out with, who we're gonna spend our time with. All these things are very important. So we have three things. We have three things we want to discuss on today. The problems, we want to deal with the problems, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We want to deal with
And the
those
beautiful.
problems and the beautiful.
Hmm.
We want to deal with all that. Me, for example, I was raised by my mother and my father, and at 16 years old, my mom passed away. So it was just me, my dad, and and the older brother. So I
Hmm.
was a certain type of way. I was a
Hmm.
certain type of way. I seen family a certain type of way. For example, like I say, some of my siblings were older. My mom passed when I was 16 years old. It was just me, my dad, and my brother. I mean, so on Thanksgiving, I mean, man, we eating whatever. I mean, we probably separate doing our own thing on Thanksgiving, and then you come from a larger family,
Yeah. I
and
come from a larger family, but a single parent.
right.
A single parent. I was raised by my mother, but my mother has six other siblings that
Right.
as I grew up. So my mother was from a large family, and then my mother's mother was from a large family,
Mm.
16, 17 siblings. So we come from a very large family. So although I was raised by a single parent, which was a very different dynamics from you, I come from a large family.
Right.
So for me, family traditions and holidays, my family, not just holidays, but on the regular, my family was always a large group of people. It's always a large gathering because there is a lot of us. It's always a large togetherness. Thanksgiving was a big thing. Most of the time we would get together on Wednesday nights and start cooking, and you're spending the night together, sleeping on the floor and everything because the family is together for those holidays. And in retrospect, looking at it now, also being raised by a single parent, that also gave me that some of my family ties were different because my mom was the worker, the provider, and all of that, versus you having a two-parent household.
Right. And so I remember the first time when I was in the military, it was around Thanksgiving. I mean, it was just you felt a certain type of way. I
Yeah,
felt a certain type of way.
not being home for
Right.
Thanksgiving was really different for
Right.
me. The very
Right.
first time I was not home for Thanksgiving,
You're number
it
one.
was it was very, very different for me because I was used to being home surrounded by family and all of my family and friends and things of that nature. And it was different because we were in Fort Knox, and we were celebrating Thanksgiving with friends, but
Right.
I wasn't with my family.
Yeah.
So things like that. Yeah. And just a lot of different things as we talked about this family tie things. A lot of things even beyond traditions just popped in my head and started to become clearer to me,
Yeah.
thinking about spouses and how family ties affect you, because we're talking about things like we're talking about now traditions and
Right.
things like family hanging out, but we're also talking about things where we said something major. You could have a family where there's drug abuse, where there's alcohol abuse, where there's domestic violence, where there's infidelity,
Right.
or you can have families where the family is good, and you have a single family. Like for me, my mother was a single parent, but my mother worked. So my mother worked, so I spent majority of the time with my grandmother.
Mm.
So I was actually reared more by my grandmother. So a lot of my values and a lot of the things I believe and a lot of the things that influenced the person that I was in my beginning stages as an adult, that came from my grandmother. I
Right.
was a lot similar to my aunts and uncles because of my grandmother's influence in my life. And
Wow.
yes, so
That's true. I mean, you
yeah,
more like a sister.
yeah, because some of my youngest uncle is only like 11 years older than me.
Right.
So you're more like sister and brother instead of uncle and niece. But
That's
at the same
interesting.
time,
Yeah.
that means that a lot of what Ernestine taught them flowed over to me, and that was things that she embedded into me, and there was things that I say that my grandmother said. So family ties, we talking about the good, the bad, the ugly, because all family ties are not bad. Some of the values that my grandmother instilled in her kids and instilled in me, they still live in me today because they are awesome values.
Yeah.
Treat people right, be good to people no matter what. It doesn't matter what somebody does to you, it matters what you do to them. You always want to help people if you can. then you also have things that could not be so good, because sometimes if you're raised by a single parent that has to give their all to take care of you,
Yeah.
then you take on that same mantra, and then when you get married, you're thinking, I gotta get it, I gotta get it, I gotta get it, and you're not connecting with your spouse in the way that you should. You're not communicating with your spouse in the way you should, because all of these things are part of family ties. The way your family communicates,
Yeah.
the way your family handles money, the way your family handles conflict. How does your significant other family respond when there's a conflict? How do they
Yeah.
work that out? How do they communicate with each other? How do they love on each
Yeah.
other? How do they express that love to each other? How do they deal with lots of different things? So those things are important for us to know about our significant other.
Right. I just want us to slow down a little bit, hit the brakes. You just went through a whole bunch of stuff that I want us to deal with. You just ran through it, and I want us to deal with it.
Okay.
For example, you mentioned finance.
Hmm.
Finance. I mean, you have different families.
Hmm.
We deal with finance different. Some people, some family they was raised up not to save money. They
Yeah.
was
And
raised up.
spend everything.
They was
Yeah.
well, and you have some families they raised up. I mean, the whole mantra of the way the family operate. I
Look
rather,
poor and
I
be rich than to look rich and be poor.
exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, but you have a lot of you have
Some people
families.
are the
They
opposite.
look
Some
like they
families are
have
the
money, but
opposite.
they
Yeah,
struggling. They
that's
live
that's what
paycheck
everybody
paycheck.
calls the
The
Joneses.
cars in somebody else's
Hmm.
name. The houses. I mean, it's everything's all swapped north, south, east, and west. And so you have one person like that, and that's the type of thing they're used to. And then you have somebody else with a different sense. That family is about saving, about investment. You're going into the relationship that can cause a problem because one is about faith. The other one is like, man, I don't care what people think. I
I
want
want
this
us
to
to
be
really
real.
be
I
good.
want us
Hmm.
to really be happy and not look like we're happy.
Hmm.
So it's a lot of different things that you have to deal with. Then you mentioned conflict. I want to deal with that. You mentioned
Hmm.
conflict, and that is very important because some families, I remember, I was one of these. I came up in a family like this. Say, what happens in this house stays in this
Stays in
house.
this house. Yeah.
So I grew up so used to not talking about things,
Hmm.
even issues. Things happen, even I'm talking things happen within the
Yeah. In the
relationship of
household.
people.
Hmm.
We didn't talk about it. We didn't deal with it, and we just kind of put it down. Even being hurt or
Yeah.
upset. I wasn't.
Can't express it.
Right. You
Hmm.
can't express how you really feel,
Hmm.
but then somebody else they come from a family would say, you know what? Let's talk about it.
Yes.
And so now, so there's another thing of how we're dealing with conflict.
Dynamics. Hmm.
Conflicts is dealt with totally different, and these things once again can pose a problem if it's not understood, if it's
Yes.
not dealt with. And the whole thing is just going into the relationship and being focused and knowing what you're getting yourself into and understanding, the puzzles. And we choose to help put these puzzles together. That's what we do. And I just want to give a stop for those that are single. If
Hmm.
you're a single, you're in the
Oh
position
yeah.
where
Yeah.
you can really
Be
ask these
selective.
questions.
Hmm.
Find out what type of family do they have? Because here's the thing: if you're a Christian and you meet somebody and they family all they do is party, drink, smoke weed, and everything else, that can be a problem. So you have to ask yourself a question: do I want my children to be brought up in this type of environment? Do I want? I mean, because there is going to be a tug of war.
Hmm. Not only that, you want to ask yourself, as a single, before I get or commit to this type of relationship, can I handle living like this for the
Exactly.
next rest of
The
my
rest of my
life?
life, right?
Because you sometimes we think when you get in a relationship, the things that bother you, you kind of overlook them in that romantic phase, thinking that they'll
You think it
they'll
changed, but it
change, or
festered.
things are passed over, or things will be different
Right.
once we're married. And that's not true, because what we're talking about today is your family ties, which is your family's influence
Yeah.
and what they've embedded in you.
Right. Right.
Those things are there. The only way for us to really get better is, first of all, like you just said, acknowledging that those things are there, and
Right.
that this thing was embedded in me from my family, or I learned this negative behavior, or I learned this positive behavior.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to say that it's all negative. I learned this positive behavior from my family, or I learned this negative behavior from my family. And the question is, what do I want to do about it? What do I want to do about it? Is this something that's going to be a problem in our relationship? And for a single that's deciding a seriousness such as being married, can I live with this for the rest of my life? Don't go into something thinking that, oh, it's gonna change. Is this something that you can deal with? Because you can't change a person's family,
Right.
and you can't change a person either. They have to want to change. But
But you can change. Go
if
ahead.
your spouse wants to change, that's not going to change their family.
Yeah.
That will change your family.
Yeah.
So your spouse can decide to be different
And,
than what he learned from his family or what she learned from her family. Both he and she can decide to be different,
right.
but that's not going to change their family.
And this is the thing. That's why it's so important to have these conversations. Because here's the thing: just because somebody come in a family that all they do is party, drink, smoke, whatever, and that's the life they
Mm-hmm.
live, that don't mean your spouse or whoever your fiance or whoever you in a relationship with, that don't mean they're gonna turn out like that. That
Mm-hmm.
don't mean that they agree with it. But you have to ask these questions. You want to have these conversations, and you want to know, like, hey, what? So
How do you feel
what?
about this?
How do you
Mm-hmm.
feel about this? What is your future? What
Mm-hmm.
is your vision for the future? Is this the vision? Because my vision is church and Bible study.
Mm-hmm.
If this is your vision, maybe, just maybe, maybe I like you. Matter of fact, I love you. I love
Mm-hmm.
you as a person. I
Mm-hmm.
love what you've done. But us coming together, I love you, but I don't like you. I mean, it's the truth. I love you, but I don't like you.
This is not gonna work. That's not gonna work.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Realizing that
That's a good way of saying
that
it,
it's
right?
not gonna work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Because this is the Marriage Coach podcast, and there are people that's been in
They
relationship that
already
never had
married.
already
Yeah.
married, never had that opportunity to ask those questions.
Mm-hmm.
So what we want to deal with on today, we want to deal with three things, and moving forward, and getting that marriage going, and working on these things and working through these three C's that we have that we're
Absolutely.
going to deal with. What's number one?
The first C is consider.
Okay, let's talk about that.
So you want to consider your significant other's family dynamics.
Mm,
All the things we just talked about and more. This is you having a conversation with your significant other,
right.
learning about their family, what their family values are, what their family beliefs are, what things their family value that are also important to them because it's influenced them.
Yeah.
What's their family traditions, and what part of those traditions are important to them? What is their family's view on money? What is their family's view on love, finances, all of these things? What is important to them that they saw or retained? What do they carry from their family? We talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is a conversation with the significant other about the things that their family ties. That's what it is. A conversation with your significant other about their family ties, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful. What
Right.
things that they have learned from their family. Consider your significant other's family dynamics. Consider their family. Consider how they communicate. Consider how they handle conflicts. Consider how they handle finances. Consider their relationships, the negative, the positive, the traditions that are important to their family, the values that your significant other take from their family, the things that they carry from their family and their family ties that are important to them.
First thing you want to do is consider. What's number two?
Number two, you want to choose what you can change.
Okay, explain that.
This is you having a conversation with your spouse after you've considered their family dynamics. Now you and your spouse are going to choose what things will and what things won't be a part of your family from
Right.
those family ties.
Mm.
So you're going to look at different things that's from your significant other's family, the things that they value, the influences that their family brought to their lives, and the things that they value because of these influences, and yourself. And how are we going to correlate this with our family? What's going to be important to me that I bring from my family? What's going to be important to you from what you bring from your family? What areas of life that we are going to mingle together from both families? Choose what will change. What values, what habits, what things that you carry from your family, or what things he or she carries from their families
Hmm.
that will be a part of your family, and what things will not. This is you and your significant other talking about what aspects of their family will also be a part of your family. Because we talked about this in the beginning. When you are married, you're two people coming together to create one unit, which is now a family in
Right.
and of itself. So it's important that you sit down, the two of you, and decide what will and will not be a part of your relationship moving forward. And then we also have to understand that when we make these decisions, that there's going to be some time for us to maneuver through those things, because what we are doing here is both parties changing to your family ties tying into your new family ties.
Right.
What things do, because the things that you allow to be a part of your relationship are the things that you are imparting to your children. And when you're imparting these things to your children, that's now a part of their family ties. So, what is it that's from my significant other's family that I want to be a part of my family? Or even as the significant other, as a wife, what part do I bring from my family and my upbringing that I desire to be a part of my family? And I can look at my own family ties and say, this is something, if it's a negative thing like abuse, alcoholism, drugism, divorce, abuse, whatever it is, domestic violence, I can look at those things myself and say, this happened in my family, and I don't want it to happen in my family. So it happened in my family ties, but I'm not going to bring it into this family that I'm creating with my significant other.
Right. Right.
And you want to do that. This is important. This is important. We talked about considering it, considering the family dynamics, but
Let me ask you. So at what point do you think you have the conversation? Because it's a thing when you're in a relationship. I mean, in the beginning, I mean, just certain things like that is not typically the things you want to
mm-hmm.
share, or we tend to share in a relationship. And a lot of times we go into the relationship and we don't share these things. We tend to never share
And they
them,
just find
and
out along the way.
right,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a dangerous part too,
Mm-hmm.
because now again you're bringing the abuse, you're bringing the hurt, you're bringing the pain, you're bringing all that of the depression, you're bringing all the offense, you're bringing all this into the relationship, and now the other person or your significant other has to deal with this. They have to deal with something they're not even aware of.
Right, right. So what I would say is, I think if you're single and dating, if you're engaged. If you're single and dating, you're not gonna divulge all your family ties
Right.
and issues, whether it's good, bad. I mean, you might be okay with, everybody's okay with sharing the good and the beautiful,
Yeah.
but the ugly and the
Probably
bad,
not something you want to share on your first date.
yeah, the ugly and the bad, that's not something you, but when you feel like that relationship is
When you know
becoming
it's getting
serious,
serious, yeah.
when you feel like this relationship has potential to become serious, then we have to talk about these
Have
things.
to have it.
Because to me, it's unfair, in my mind, this is me, it's unfair for you to allow someone to get all the way to the point of um and when I say this, I want to say this part first. If you know it, if you know it, it's unfair to do it. Sometimes, we talked about this many times in the past. Cedric and I were young when we got married, so we didn't even know that family dynamics and family
No,
ties
we had no
play
idea.
a part in who you are. But if you are watching this podcast today, you are now privy to that information.
Yeah.
So since you're privy to that information, you don't want to not use it to your advantage. And if you're in a relationship, when you believe that that relationship is starting to look serious, then it's time to have some talks.
Yeah.
And then there's some things that you can
Absolutely.
just pay attention to. Because when you're dating somebody, you go around their family. You mention family reunion. Sometimes you're dating, you go to the family reunion. You go to the cousin's wedding. You go to the sister's barbecue. You go to the 4th of July with the aunt and the uncle.
Yeah.
You go to the vacation home
So
that
you're
the
meeting the
grandparents
family.
own.
You know the
Yes, so
family.
you're meeting mom and dad. If they have siblings, you've met their siblings. If you've been with them any length of time, you've heard comments or things being said about certain people in the family. Pay attention.
Be
And when
observant.
you pay attention and be observant and look at what's going on in that person's family, if you go to every family function and it turns into a broil, hello, that's a flag. Pay attention. This is how this family operates. And I don't mean that like, oh, they, this is them. Not that you're casting the person out because of their family, because as you stated, that I think is very important, a person can come from a family that's jacked up,
Yeah.
but they can get to the point as an adult that my family was jacked up and I'm going to do the work to be a better me. And I'm going to do the work to not bring this into my relationships. So they've now acknowledged that this negativity and all of this was a part of my family ties, but I'm not going to take it into my family. So they're moving and operating differently. But when you see that, if you're dating them and you see that all this is going on, then a conversation needs to be had so that they can say to you, I understand, this is a part of how my family operates, but this is not what I want to be a part of my family. If you bring that to their attention and say, you know, uh, John or Jim or Kim
Yeah.
or Lisa, I noticed that every time we go to a family function, it turns into a brawl. People are fighting, people are cussing, people are this, and that. What are your thoughts on that? How do you feel about that? If they're like, that's just how my family is. It's not a big deal, whatever. It just happens. Families fight. If that's their take on it, but you see it more seriously, then the conversation needs to go further.
All right.
I see this as a serious issue. You don't? And then explain to them why you see it as a serious issue. And if not, the conversation can go a different way. They can say, yeah, I realize, my family have a few issues. And, I don't, when I have a family, I don't want that to be brought into my family, but I love my family,
Yeah.
so that's why. So then you understand, okay, this person attends these events because they love their family.
Yeah. But they come
But
in like, oh man, this is how we do it. It is what it is.
yeah,
You don't
then
have to
that means
deal
they're
with it.
okay
Like,
with it.
yeah.
That means they're okay with it. Now you have another question to ask yourself. Am I okay with it?
Yeah.
Can I live with this? Do I want to bring my kids up in this? Do I want my kids to come to family functions and seeing fighting, cussing, turning into a brawl? Is that something I'm going to be okay with for the rest of my life? So I believe that when you're dating somebody, when you're around their family members, you have the option to pay attention to what their family dynamics look like.
Yeah.
And this is not about judging. This is about what you see, facts, what you see. And then you also have the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with that person when you feel like the relationship is getting serious and y'all been dating for a while, or you have now accepted, this person proposing, you accepted the proposal. Now you want to have these conversations. What is your belief on this? What is your belief on finances? What is your belief on this? What is your belief on that? Because
I
you
mean,
have,
how we gonna have fun?
yeah, all of that.
Vacations, everything. Yeah.
Exactly. Activities, everything. You now have the perfect opportunity to set your relationship up for success because you now know, okay, this relationship is getting serious. We're going to create a unit, which
Yeah.
is the two of us becoming one. We're going to create a unit, and now we get to decide. We said choose. We get to choose what we change. We get to choose what our relationship looks like. We get to choose what our marriage look like. We've been talking about family ties, and whether it's considering your family ties, what's been good with your family, what's been ugly with your family, what's been bad with your family, what hasn't worked with your
Yeah.
family,
Yeah.
even the things that you've taken on, you have the opportunity to choose if those things carry on in relationships with you or if you cut them off, especially when they always say, when you know better, you do better. When you don't know that these things affect you, because like I said, for us, as a younger adult, we got married. You were 20, I was 19.
Yeah.
I had no clue that the things that I experienced as a child, and I mean normal family things such as spending Thanksgiving together or such as disagreements in the family. How did conflict get resolved in my family? Was there a sit down, okay, this brother agrees with this, disagrees with this sister, let's sit down and talk about it. Our mom and dad disagree, let's sit down and talk about it. All of these things, those dynamics played a part in who I was when I came into the marriage. But I had a choice to stay with those things or to say, this did not work here, there, but I'm not going to do this. I'm going to be different. My marriage is going to be different. We're going to talk through our conflict. We're going to talk through our situations, or, we're going to yell and scream and whatever, or we're going to be silent and pretend like it didn't happen. Whatever the dynamics was, it was still a choice for me to decide that it was going to continue that way in my family, which is me and my husband, who are now married and we're now in a relationship together. It was my choice. It was our choice together to decide if we continue to carry these things into our relationship and they become a part of our family ties, or if we're going to tie this off and we're going to leave that right there. We're not taking this with us.
Right. So number 2 is choose. What's number 3?
Number 3 is to create.
Create. Let's talk about that.
You want to create appropriate boundaries.
All right.
Listen up. Once you and your significant other, you are always considerate of their family dynamics. You two have sitting down and together as a unit, you have chosen, you choose what will change and what will not be a part of your family unit. Now you want to create the appropriate boundaries.
Right.
We've talked about the good, the bad, the ugly. So create appropriate boundaries. If your husband's, your significant other, I don't want to say husband, your significant other's family traditions are awesome, that family togetherness is good, then you want to create healthy boundaries around that. What time are we going to spend with his family? What time are we going to spend with her family? What are we going to do to incorporate this tradition and work these things into our marriage? And then on the flip side, if they are negative and unhealthy and extreme, the dysfunction is extreme, now you have to create boundaries as far as what amount of time am I going to, so I'm already married, right? And my significant other's family is severely dysfunctional when it comes to holidays. Every holiday turns into a broil. Now you have to create a boundary.
And I can give you a good example about that. I mean, sometimes, you have families, let's say the gatherings start around 2, 3 o'clock. The later it gets, the more intoxicated
there it
gets.
is. Come on.
At certain points. So you may say, you know what, hey, we're going to stay a few hours. 6 o'clock is the cutoff.
That's it.
If we stay here past 6 o'clock, it's about to go down.
That's it.
I don't want my kids to see this. I know, because
creating healthy boundaries.
Right. And that's the thing. It's not my family. So my family listen to this. I'm not talking about you. But let's say if it was my family. So if it was my family, I know I grew up with these people.
Right.
So I know after 6 o'clock, it's about to go down. So here it is. I talked to, hey, babe, hey, 6 o'clock. Mark, we got to get out of here. This is why, because this is this. I'm pretty sure you're going to agree and be like, yeah, you're right.
Absolutely.
So we load up the kid. Hey, come on, y'all, it's time to go. Hey, yeah, we're finna go.
Absolutely.
We're finna go over to whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
It's like you're understanding that. So creating those boundaries, putting these things in place. And what's so good, do not be reactive.
Be proactive.
Be proactive.
Absolutely. We talked in a life group at church about boundaries, and we use this analogy. Boundaries are like fences. So at my house, there's a fence. This fence tells my neighbors what part of the yard belongs to me and what part of the yard belongs to them. I have a neighbor on the right, I have a neighbor on the left. And there is a fence between my yard and their yard. Right. We share this fence, but on the other side of that fence, that's your property. On the other side of this fence is my property. Your trash should not be coming over here. Your dog should not be pooping over here. All of these things. So with that being said, this is what you're doing in your family unit as a spouse, as a husband and a wife, as fiance, girlfriend, boyfriend. You are creating healthy boundaries as far as to what you will allow to come into your space, what you will allow to be a part of your family ties, because you are realizing, we said it in the beginning, the more, and you said this to me about something completely different, but it works here. The more you spend time around people, a person, a situation, it influences you. It influences your behavior.
Right.
It influences your responses. It influences you. So you want to create healthy and appropriate boundaries. You don't want to you you listen. If you're married, and I want to say this because it's coming to my mind and in my heart. If you're married and you know your significant other's family is dysfunctional, or they have some bad habits or some negative habits, you don't want to say things like, don't you take my kids around those people, or don't you bring those, I don't want those people at my house, and things of that nature. You want to create appropriate boundaries,
Right.
because at the end of the day, this is that person's family. But you want to create appropriate boundaries. What role will you allow them to play within your area, within
Mm.
your sphere?
Yeah.
What will you allow them? Because my neighbor can't come plant flowers in my yard unless I allow him to. And so
Mm.
that's what you want to think about when you're talking about creating appropriate boundaries. You want to think about, what are you going to allow
Yeah.
others to bring into your space?
Wow.
Remember and pay close attention to the influence that the people that we are connected to have on our lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If this is your first time listening to the Marriage Coach Podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a big thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Also, please rate this podcast and leave a review on iTunes to help get the word out. We also want to invite you to head on over to our leadership podcast, Lead to Greatness, where you will receive leadership and entrepreneurship nuggets and advice every week.
So we want to thank you for joining us today. Looking forward to hanging out with you again on next week as we continue to help you take your relationship from surviving to thriving. Bye. See you next week.